You are listening to UMY Nights by the Creative Muslim Club, where we discuss faith, creativity and culture and get inspired by the stories of like-minded Muslim creatives. Explore the stories of creative peers and learn how to navigate a world of narratives, counter-narratives and originality with your hosts Mala Mehel and Dina Bousba.
Okay, بسم الله.
بسم الله.
رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Oh Lord, open my heart for me and make this task easy for me. Remove the knot out of my tongue so that they can understand me. Welcome, salam alaikum. I'm so happy to see you guys and to see familiar faces but also new faces. Tonight we are joined by Rachad Debdoubi. And before we start the actual interview, I want to welcome you guys to the UMY Night, which is sponsored by European Youth Commission, which allows us to organize 6 nights, of which this is the 3rd night, in which we discuss the identity with a creator from our community. Is that clear for everyone? Mm-hmm. Yes? Try to minimize the sounds. You don't have to be like silent and all uptight, but just for the recordings, because we are recording this event. So, for me, it is a really big honor today.
Me too.
Thank you. That I can interview you, because I really see you as one of the big brothers out of the community, especially for me. Because you're a wordsmith who has developed like a unique style on how you perform in Dutch and in English. And you explore things like identity, mental health, and you've been in the spoken word scene for years now, right?
Yep.
But you've also recently published a book, Naam, but it's not the only thing you've done. Higher, yes? Can everybody see it? You'll get a link at the end to buy it as well. But the thing I love about this book is that there are a lot of segments that I've used for tonight, because you discussed your point of view of the world.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to do tonight. To start with, this is the book as well. But tonight, I want to start with the foreword, which has this sentence. The titles simply show that wherever I am, wherever I go or what I do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with me. Therefore, Naam, meaning at peace. So you really acknowledge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your foreword. And I was wondering why that is so important for you.
Well, it's important for me because I figured out along the way while I was writing, so I've been writing for a little over 10 years now, that it's part of my identity. While there were times of highs and lows, at first that wasn't actually the title. The title was all the things we took for granted, which is way too long. And I realized in the meantime what it meant for me, and also the fact that I started with choosing a subtle way to show my identity and picking 99 poems. And that's where I wanted to leave it at first. And then my wife said to me, maybe try to dig a little bit deeper. So try to look into the names. Like, this is a perfect moment to actually learn the names, understand the names, and maybe also see moments in your life where you actually had Allah with you, not in a sense like, you know what I mean, but that process started, was really hard. It took me like 2 months to actually figure out, okay, are there names that actually sort of like are coherent with the words that I've written? Not in a sense like I'm trying to explain the names, absolutely not. It's just that the names have a certain meaning and I could link it to the poems that I was writing. So whether it was the most just or the all-hearing or you name it, I would find pieces in my work that sort of like links to that, one-to-one, or like a very broad general context as well. And that's how I got to the point where I realized that all this time, maybe unconsciously, I was thinking, about that. And
Because
that's...
you're referring to existing work that you already had. Or,
Yeah. So it was in retrospect.
Yeah.
And that gave me a feeling of peacefulness. And that's how I got the name, because I was at peace.
Yeah. That's so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to actually, because I already read your book, but it's nice to also see the other side of the story.
Yeah.
And like you said, you've been writing for 10 years. How did you change in your writing in the last years?
I got way more political. In the beginning, it was really abstract. A lot of usage of metaphors and analogies, a lot of water, a lot of time to convey certain messages, mostly about emotions, things that I was feeling. And over the time, I started to read more political books, also due to my wife, because she is a political scientist, and so she would advise me to read certain books. And that only made me more radical in my way of writing.
That's something I want to touch upon, but in a bit. Okay. But it's a really important subject as well. And you also mentioned the mental health part. I read that you, and I didn't know that, but I read that you started writing because of that, right?
Yeah. I was still studying law. I studied law for 2 months. I opened the book Nederlands Staatsrecht, and I realized that this was not going to happen. I immediately went to StudyLink, and
you actually stopped.
Yeah, immediately. Like I closed the book, immediately went to the website, and said, "I'm done. Like I'm not doing this."
And why? Like I can feel
because
it, but...
like it was so dry. Like I could not handle it, and I realized that I just made a mistake. And because I wanted to do medicine, and that was the second time, and there were only like 4 or 5 days left, and I had to make a choice. And it was like, I'm gonna do this, and I'll figure it out. That was not a good way to choose a study, apparently. So that's where I was not feeling that well, because I wasn't doing anything. I also didn't have a job. I was 20 years old, and I fell into this pit. And I started to talk to the student psychologist at the university. That's where I sort of realized that I was in this vicious cycle of not knowing what I want to do, but also feeling the urge to do something. And I didn't know how to break out. And that's how she explained to me, like, a lot of these thoughts are stuck in your head. You're not sharing them really with anyone. So maybe try to do that. So I started to do that. And I guess naturally, organically, I started to use metaphors to also explain things to myself. And that's where sort of like this love for words started. Started to watch a lot of Def Poetry Jam, which was my biggest inspiration there, specifically Shihan. And that's where I also started to be more poetic in my ways of writing. And
And did you experience this as a big step from writing to actually performing? Or was that naturally?
Well, performing was actually not something that was on my list of things that I wanted to do.
No.
That's just something that came up when I think someone mentioned Elton Kine in my work on Instagram. And Elton just asked me, do you want to perform sometime at Woorden voor de Zinnen? And I'm not really a person that would say no without actually trying something. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'll just try and I'll see what happens. And I actually kind of liked it. Even though like 10 years fast forward, I still have shaking knees on a stage. So it's still really weird to stand on a stage. But as soon as the words come out, like the first 10 words, and after that, I relax. But yeah, it's something that's still stuck with me. But yeah.
And are there any rituals or anything you do to reduce that anxiety before performance, or is it?
Yeah, most of the anxiety resides in in your physical. So a lot of it's in your mouth. So I would used to like move my mouth to like release the tension. That helps a lot. But also I'll never forget that my first performance, the guy that was going to perform before me, some Cape Verdean guy, I don't know exactly what his name is anymore, but he thought I was really anxious. And he said, he asked me like, are you anxious? I was like, hell yes, I'm anxious. My first performance. He was like, that's good, you're focused. And like it completely switched in my head, and that's where I realized, okay, if I'm really anxious, that means that I'm here and I know what I want to do.
Clear intention as well.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I will use that one as well. Yeah, thank you. But I want to move on to the next part, which is actually about the creative industry. I really like this part in one of your poems, which is growing up in two worlds. Displacement is a cape we choose to wear. We declare the grounds under our feet. When I met you, it was like I think 2 years ago now. I think something like that. And I remember one of my first conversations with you was about the industry, and it was about because I then started as a spoken word artist myself, and that's why I see you as a big brother, because in that time I could ask you about how do you actually negotiate? Because I believed in my work, but I didn't know if the world would believe in my work. And also you get asked at places where you don't know if you are allowed or welcomed in the way that we want to be welcomed to the place. And I think we also had discussions about that had to do with my background as well. Like as a woman with a migration background who's Muslim, that also gives a sort of load.
Absolutely.
And talking about money can be difficult, especially I find it difficult in our industry. Have you encountered like any struggles with that? And how would you face them?
At first, I was just happy people would pay me for something. So I was like, okay, it's if I get like 50 euros, that's fine. Or at least if you make sure that my costs are taken care of, it's fine. And over time, you get more shows, but it also gets in the way of other things in your life, like work. And then you have to realize, okay, I need to see myself as, it sounds weird, but as a businessman. So you have to realize that you have to negotiate your worth. And knowing when to do that is also realizing that your words are your words, like it's your truth, and no one else can tell that. And every story must be told. And if you want to do that on a stage, be my guest, 100%. Because at the end of the day, that's all we do as people, as humans, is we tell stories. And it could be as simple as explaining how a recipe works, which is also a story, or standing on a stage and sharing poetry. So over time, you also, because the spoken word community is a pretty warm and not that big community, you discuss those types of things, and you realize that some people ask this, some people ask that. Some organizations have fixed fees that they give you, and that's how you also then can base your own fees. And also, which I think is really important, is realizing that not all organizations are the same. I'm not going to ask some small Islamic school the same fee as I would the Haagse Hogeschool, for example. That's just ridiculous, especially if you want to convey a certain message to specific kids and to try to be in some way a role model.
And it's like what I find difficult still, and that's why I still ask you for advice sometimes, is that I don't want to be there because they want someone with a specific background to be there. If you understand what I mean? So they won't ask me, or at least that's how it feels. They won't ask me for my work, but they will ask me for my background. How do you find, how can you like remove that, or how can you make it the filter to remove that? Is that possible?
Yeah, 100% it's possible. You ask questions, you ask what the reason and what the idea behind certain events is. And you understand also who the people is that they're actually trying to reach. And that way you can actually find out whether it's something that you want to spend your time on. And sometimes you have to be in places where you don't usually will be, just so people can actually look into the worlds of others. But yeah, it's every situation needs to be examined. Yeah.
Yeah. And you also said sometimes it clashes with your work because you also have a separate career next to being a creative.
Yeah.
How is that balance, like between working and using your creative voice?
For me, it's actually a sort of like artistic freedom because I don't have to worry about bills or anything. So I work 40 hours a week, and whenever I can perform, I will perform. It's not something that I actually struggle with, to be honest. Also, my work is also pretty easy to work outside of like the office hours if needed, as long as I just do what I need to do. So in that sense, it's not really a problem for me. I actually like it because this artistic freedom gives me the option to say no to certain assignments that I get. Like, for example, I did something like 4 or 5 years ago for Puma. I hated it because they rewrote everything that I wrote. And so I was like, okay, but why did you need me then? If
you don't use my work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So those types of things I just don't do anymore. I only do things that I actually like to do, or I think that are important to do.
Did you give them that feedback, like that?
I did, yeah.
How did they respond?
Well, it's a big company, and at the end of the day, they just follow orders, and they don't really know exactly why. So, and honestly, I didn't really care. So, yeah.
No, but I understand. It's like if someone gives you such an opportunity, it sounds like the dream, or it can sound like the dream, but eventually,
it's not.
Exactly, yeah. I want to remind you guys about the Mentimeter. Perhaps there are any questions. And I also want to ask you, Rachad, about if you could give, you already gave a lot of tips, but if you could give us a tip for like the starting businesswoman or man who wants to be a creative, like what would you give them as advice?
There's no good way to start. Just start. And you're not going to be great at the beginning. Absolutely not. Like my first work was like, if I read it sometimes now, I was like, oh, did I write that? God.
Yeah.
That's horrible. But you get better along the way also because you learn from other people and you realize that certain things don't work and some things do work. And you also have to accept the fact that a lot of your work is just not good enough. Like, for example, Pablo Picasso. He only sold like 1.9% of his work. So most of his work was not even deemed to be sellable. And that's also how you have to approach your work. Sometimes you write something and it's not interesting enough. I have, I think, like 1,700 pieces in my notes on my phone. And I think maybe 70% of that is just unfinished, or I just wrote 3 or 4 words and then I forget what I wanted to say and I just leave it there and I was like, I don't know what I wanted to do with this, so whatever. Yeah.
And does it, like for me, sometimes the unfinished works, it feels like a loss. Like if I see them years after, I'm like, oh, I feel sad about it actually.
Yeah.
Do you have any feelings like that, or is it?
No, I think like it's just meant to be that you wouldn't finish that piece. And sometimes I do find like hidden gems within my own work where I was like, oh, I can do something with this. I can work with this. And sometimes what I also do, which I don't know if it's a really weird thing to do, but I rewrite certain pieces because I just feel or think about them differently now.
Yeah, that's very relatable.
Yeah,
as well. One of the questions, because I see a lot of questions also about the political side, and I want to discuss them as well, but we have a moment for that. We're going to take our time with that. What was your biggest intention behind your poetry?
To make people realize that they're not alone in certain feelings or thoughts that they have. Because I think if you know a little bit about what I write, like identity and mental health and stuff like that, it's really nice to have that realization that you're not alone in certain thoughts and emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was for me because I needed that, but I didn't talk about it. So, and this is a way I found to sort of like convey that message.
I think also one of the questions I just read was who are your biggest influences in the world of poetry or spoken word? And that resonates with, I'm going to ask you the question again, but before that I want to mention this part of one of the poems.
Yeah.
I have seen them drink mild waters of others with a cupped hand of stone and still die of thirst as they hollowly search for softness in the gardens of others. So in my head, that's quite the opposite of a role model or someone you can look up to or someone that can influence you. That's why I used it.
Yeah.
And someone asked a question, who are your biggest influences in the world of poetry or spoken word?
Amir Suleiman is really a big influence for me.
Yeah.
Dead Man Walking, I don't know if you've ever seen that piece, but it's amazing. Like I would watch that and I was like, will I ever reach that level? Like it's so
Inshallah.
good. Inshallah. But also just here in the Netherlands, like for example, Lef Afitan is someone that I really look up to. Is someone that I started with in like 2018. We did something for NPO together, and we just hit it off, and we're friends now. And to see him do the things that he's doing right now, like writing a philosophical book and doing stuff on TV, it's just amazing to see, and he's really a big inspiration when it comes to that.
Yeah.
And someone like, for example, Luan Buleshkai is also really, he has his own unique style, like it's just punchlines after punchlines after punchlines. So it's really entertaining, and I love that really. Zainab El-Bouni is amazing in multiple languages, which is also amazing to see. Obviously, I love your work as well, so you're also a really good influence. So there are so many people where you can learn from, but you can also just be in awe. Like for example, Benzo Karim has a very unique style of like cutting off sentences and then using the words that's actually supposed to be part of that sentence for the next sentence. I love that. I'm not sure if he's gotten that from MF Doom, but that's something that MF Doom, for example, has done a lot. So yeah, it's really great to see. And like what I said in the first question, Shihan is like the first person that I saw. What else do you have? Laser Garza, amazing, also really good. Yeah.
Because it also feels like you grow with them as well. Like you've seen them grow up.
100%.
Yeah. And what lessons did you learn from them?
That like there's no ceiling on how good you can be. Like it only gets better. You can always get better, never worse. And that's something that I really realized. And also that if you have a way with words, and everyone can have a way with words, is that it can be very divergent. Like it doesn't necessarily only have to be like spoken word or poetry, but I've seen friends like going to acting, have their own theater show, make music. So you can go in so many ways, or use it as a voice actor, stuff like that. Yeah.
And are there any people who, young voices that you're seeing right now, who you think, oh, this is going to become big?
Esma de Schrijver.
Yeah, I agree. I really agree.
She is so good.
She is really good. If you guys, for the people who speak Dutch, she is really good.
Yeah. Esma de Schrijver is amazing. Anarchistische tekeningen, Rachad is also really good. Let me think. Yeah, there's so many people like that. But Esma, for me, like the first time I followed her online, but she doesn't really have any work online. And she performed during Museumnacht together with me, actually. And I heard her perform and my jaw just dropped. So she's so good.
I think also what I've been noticing is that our work is becoming more political, but also rougher. Like straight to the point. That Esma has that, she can say something so straight to your face, but with the, like, I don't know what it is, but it's so nice because she explains how we feel, but in a very specific way.
Yeah, she is really relentless with her words.
She is. She really is. About being relentless, I'm going to continue to the next one, which is about speaking out. This one is one of my favorite because it's very short, but it explains it in like 2 sentences what is going on. The problem in this society is the fact that people can be whatever they want to be and they still choose to be sheep. Can you explain this?
Yeah, I actually wrote this over 9 years ago, I think. And when I look back, I at that moment did not realize actually what I meant by it. Until I started to read more and understand more and sort of like honed my critical thinking. And what I mean by this is that a lot of people lack critical thinking also because it's something that we don't really condone but also motivate in school. So you see a lot of standard things going on in school, but like not speaking or learning how to speak. I think that's really important. You can say whatever you want about the United States. I can say a lot of things, but I'm not going to do right now.
I was going to say, if we're going to start there.
But debating and speaking is something that they're really good at.
Because they're taught that in school as well.
Exactly. It's part of school. Like I don't know if people actually talk to like Americans. They talk a lot, but they do speak very eloquently. So, and that's something that I really missed here in the Netherlands. Like nobody actually learns how to do a presentation or anything like that. So all the presentations are really boring. So the critical thinking that comes out of it, because you actually think about what you want to say, is missing. So people just rely on other medias or other people for their own opinion, which is, I think, very dangerous.
Yeah, and the lacking of critical thinking in education and also other fields. What do you think the responsibility of us as artists or creators is in that way, in that sense?
I don't know exactly how she said it, but Nina Simone said that an artist must reflect the time. And I think that says it all. I think it's really important to understand and to realize, no matter how big you are, that you have a responsibility to sway the world into a way that's livable by all people, creatures, whatever you want, without holding back anything.
Yeah, that's also, it relates to what we discussed before this interview about you cannot be not political in your work if you're doing your work.
Everything is inherently political, so you don't really have a choice. And people that says like, I stay out of politics, the most stupid, contradictive thing to say, because your whole life is political. Like your body is political. So how can it not be that you talk about politics or at least understand what is happening in the world?
I agree. Yeah, and I think this is something I want to touch upon more after the break. It also gives us a bit of thinking matter to discuss with each other, and also if you guys have any questions you can add them. I will just leave this open. We'll be back in 5 minutes, I think, right? Something like that. So I'll see you guys in 5 minutes. We're going to continue our conversation. We were talking about responsibilities that artists have, and you quoted a very beautiful quote from Nina Simone. I was wondering, because we are working in those systems, it's like I'm going straight to the question.
Okay.
We're working in the systems, but we're also resisting them. And we need to navigate that. At least that's how I see it. You cannot not be part of the system, but you're still resisting against them. How do you see that?
Yeah, exactly like that, actually. It's you don't have a choice but to participate in the system because you have to survive. But that does not necessarily mean that you have to accept everything. And you find ways to resist in a manner that at least not put you in any danger as far as that's possible. Also taking into account color, religion, whatever you want to call it. I think it's really important to assess every situation on its own and realize whether you should do it or not. I remember during the encampments, they would ask, like, okay, who is able to do high risk, who is able to do medium risk, and who's able to do low risk. And those are the moments where you have to ask yourself, okay, how far can I go and actually do it or not?
And my question is, do you feel any tension? But I believe that's yes, the answer is yes. But how do you deal with that tension?
With that tension? That's a good question. It's always in hindsight. So on that moment, like, a lot of thoughts go through you and you try to make the right decision. But if you always try to at least take safety into account and also responsibility, in my case, you usually make the right choices. So.
Yeah, and also with a piece like when you're talking about safety, something I realized is that you use your full name when you perform, as do I. And it was something I debated before, like in my mind, there was like debate going on about how safe is this for me, but also for my future. Did you ever take that into account when you decided to actually use your full name as an artist?
For me, it was actually mostly a confidence thing when I decided to use my full name, because first, when I started, my artist name was Arcane Chad, and
Arcane Chad.
Yeah, that was my artist name.
Yeah.
Because I was not comfortable with sharing things under my own name. At the very start, I didn't even act like it was my own work. I would just see how people would react to it. And that's how I developed, and I got to this point where I started to feel more confident, and also mentally start to feel more confident. And I chose to just perform and write under my own name, because I also felt like I deserved to do that.
Yeah.
Because it also coincided with the idea that I could not accept calling myself a poet, because I wasn't doing it like sort of like full time. It felt like a slap in the face of people that actually do it full time. But that's also something that I just had to overcome.
Do you still feel that way, or is that gone?
Not at all.
And what changed that?
What changed that is, in retrospect, realizing how much I've already accomplished, like performing on festivals, performing on TV, radio, you name it, but also getting that recognition of friends, which was the most important for me, where I realized, I deserve that.
Yeah. No, you do. You already do.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was wondering, at the beginning of the interview, you were talking about how you became more political in your work. Can you explain that?
Yeah. That's also something that happened naturally, that like the more you learn, that sort of like becomes your reality. So it's also the way you think then, and you also start to see it in certain situations in life or conversations. You always link it back to that. So eventually your work also becomes that in a sense. That's how it sort of got to that point where I started to become way more political in my work.
Yeah. And has that brought any changes, like in the amount of events you can attend or like are invited to, or any other things? Do you see a change?
Not necessarily, because I still do certain things that really don't have to do with politics. I have this piece called "You Don't Know What You Have Till It's Gone," And that has nothing to do with like politics. It's just all feelings. It's about the idea that you never actually have something. So it just comes and goes. And everything in between is gone before you realize it. So it has nothing to do with like politics. And depending on where I'm going and also what the situation is, like before the 7th of October, I would just think, okay, today I'm not really in the mood to talk about politics. I'll just keep it artistic or whatever you want to call it. It's always artist, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But after that, I just felt this duty to use every stage that I got to convey the message of what I think is important and what is happening in the world. So yeah, again, the situation calls for a certain act.
Yeah, I'm also asking because I remember this happened twice actually, that I was asked for a venue where they explicitly asked me to not talk about Palestine because they thought it was too political. And my work actually, like your work as well, mentions Palestine. It does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever encountered something like that? Or is that...
I have not, but that's where my artistic freedom actually comes in. And I just say, then I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. And are there like such discussions around you with people who also are spoken word artists about this?
I've seen it happen to Lef a lot, but Lef does not shy away of an argument or a conversation with those people. So it is something that I have seen happening not only on like small stages, but also like big companies asking me to do certain things.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not uncommon.
No. But it's also the confidence you mentioned earlier that you need to actually have those arguments to convey your message, I think, right?
100%. Yeah, you have to. How do you say that in English? Op je strepen staan.
Stand your ground.
Stand on business.
Yeah.
Exactly. You have to stand on business when it comes to those types of things, because it's a slippery slope if you choose to give people the benefit of the doubt every time, because the benefit of the doubt starts to become something that's certain, and you don't want that.
No. I was actually wondering, we have the Mentimeter, but I'm also wondering if you guys have any questions that you want to ask to Rachad right now. So we have a microphone. It's on a spoon. So it's really cool to hold the microphone as well.
Don't eat it.
The spoon is working. It's a concept. This is a CMC spoon. It's copyrighted and everything, so don't use it, please.
It's warm.
It's warm though.
I was wondering if you ever felt regret to not having used certain words or having used certain words or phrasing, and if you felt regret towards the words themselves, or how you dealt with that.
Really good question. I have to dig deep then. In the beginning, when I started to write more political, there would be moments that I would stand on stage where I would skip certain sentences because in the moment, like, not that I was thinking before I would go on stage that I would not say it, but in the heat of the moment, I just chickened out. I'm going to be honest. Because I didn't know what type of reaction it would lead to.
It was also because of the audience? Yeah.
So I did something for the Bureau of Affairs of Discriminations. And it was in a church, and it was like I was doing a show in a senior housing.
Yeah.
It was like all old people, all whites, and I felt so uncomfortable to say certain things.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, I got over that really quick when I realized how bad things were becoming. And I had this sense of like, okay, if you're so outspoken about the most heinous things that you think about people, I can definitely be outspoken about things where I think that everyone matters in society. So yeah, I had those moments.
Have you ever had like responses afterwards, after saying the words that you wanted to say, that encouraged you or actually made it like uncomfortable because you said certain things? Leave a spoon. You can keep it. It's a gift.
No, I actually have not. It's always been really positive reactions. I've never had someone come to me and say, "Hey, I do not agree with what you just said." Where I do actually motivate people to do so, because if I'm really being honest, like compliments and everything like that, it's amazing. It's great feedback, but it doesn't really help you as an artist, because it becomes really general. Oh, it's so beautiful. Okay, what was beautiful? Yeah, it was just beautiful. There's not something I can really do with that. So when you give feedback, I think it's really important to also think about it and also to be more specific on what it exactly is, whether it's negative or a positive.
Yeah. And I remember, I don't know if you still do that, but when I first performed where you were there, like you were in the room, I asked you for in Den Haag. I asked you for feedback, and you said you gave me feedback, like very specific feedback, which was very nice. But when I asked you about my poetry itself, you said, "But that's yours. I cannot give you feedback on the things you say because those are yours. I can give you feedback on intonation, stuff like that."
Yeah.
Which is also very beautiful because it is your own work.
Yeah, there's nothing I can say about your own truth. So that's something that's yours. So and even if I did say something about it, I don't think it should affect you in any way. I think again, I don't know exactly how he said it, and I know he's a little bit of a lunatic right now, but I remember Kanye saying that he said, I don't care I don't care what people think of my work as long as they think something about it. So if they're careless about my work, that would hurt me way more than if people think it's awful.
Yeah. That's a good one. Are there any other questions from the audience? The spoon can be given to the front.
Wow, beautiful. I love this concept. Assalamu alaikum. My question goes with the quote you mentioned by Nina Simone, which is actually one of my favorite quotes. So an artist's duty is to reflect the times. When it comes to reflecting the times as an artist, there's many different ways to incorporate that. Some people like to romanticize it, to make it a bit softer. Others do it very harshly. What is your creative process in taking the times, so to say, and transforming it into words?
Really good question.
Yeah.
What I usually do is, and that's how I start every creative process, is I write 5 or 6 words that I think about or feel when I think about the situation that I want to write about, or the subject that I want to write about. And then I sort of, think around those words. So I write out sentences that I think are should be part of the piece, and then I let it sit, like actually marinate, because what I'm feeling at that moment will not be how I feel like a week later or a couple of days later. And then I look at it again and I see certain connections that I can make, and I know what I want to bring back and which topics that I want to pull into the piece. And I think about how I want to go about it. And then I sort of like give myself, I don't want to call it tips, but just a couple of sentences like, okay, I want this to come back into the piece, and I want this to come back into the piece. And then I slowly start working on it. And I never know how it ends, because that's something that I have a lot of trouble with, is knowing how certain parts end. Yeah.
You just start somewhere in the middle and hope there's an...
Yeah, and then I'll figure out, okay, maybe I should stop here.
Yeah, relatable.
Yeah.
Any other questions from you guys?
I was curious, was there ever, I mean, I can imagine you perform and people come up to you afterwards. Is there like a moment that really left a lasting impression where somebody came up to me and was inspired? Or maybe not inspired by your work?
Yeah, it was uh, a lady that came up to me and immediately said, "Can I hug you?" And I was like, "Okay." And she hugged me and she said, I performed the part, the piece, it's called Je weet niet wat je hebt tot het weg is. So the part you don't know what you have until it's gone. And she said that I helped her process the death of her husband in 3 minutes, where she was working on processing it in for more than half a year. And yeah, that stuck with me forever. That was really, that was beautiful. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It also shows the impact you can have with your words.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
Is there a negative experience you remember that also brought you something in a way?
I really can't think of one. I also wanted to think of one when we were discussing it, also like situations where you felt uncomfortable, and also what you asked. But to be honest, I haven't had those moments yet, really. Yeah.
No haters.
No haters, I guess.
No.
Yeah.
And I'm also wondering, something we also discussed before is we were talking about what we're doing right now and how work is going, and we ended somewhere in how is academia not political anymore, and how is creativity not political anymore. How do you deal with that? It not being, or people saying it's not political?
I think it just became this buzzword.
Yeah.
What they said to those basketball players when Black Lives Matter was going on, and they said shut up and dribble, don't talk about politics because you're just an athlete. It's such a stupid thing to say to people that are really affected by well, maybe not the basketball players, they're millionaires, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So to say that you should keep politics out of certain areas is so contradictory when you know that everything is inherently political. Mm-hmm. And I think that most people don't even know what they're saying when they say that. And it's also because they're so comfortable with the current system that they can actually say something like, keep politics out of it. Yeah, you can keep politics out of it because you can go past all those barriers that we have to deal with every day.
Yeah, and it also brings me to my next question, that if I look at the spoken word community in the Netherlands, it's like the ones I know, it's quite diverse.
100%.
And the representation is there. Why is that important to have that representation?
Because it's
important for you.
Yeah, it's important for me because people say your name in spaces where you're not at that moment, and also because they understand how important it is for others to hear about the things that they're probably also dealing with. So it's really about stories, and you cannot have a white person tell my story. It happens, but
it does.
But yeah, those things I think it's really important, especially because the spoken word community is a really warm and welcoming community. They support you when you're starting. They make sure that if there are any other events where they cannot perform, they say, well, maybe you should ask Dina, maybe she can. Those types of things. I think that really helps. Yeah.
I think it really matters to be there for each other when you're not around.
Yeah.
Because that also gives you the push to, for me, I think there were times I was like, okay, maybe I'm not going to do this anymore. Yeah. And then if I would just get a message from you or someone else saying, I've been asked for a venue, but I cannot go. Will you go?
Yeah.
That really helped.
Yeah. 100%.
Also, I don't know if you have that as well, but I remember struggling with asking for. This is a completely different subject altogether, and it touched upon what we said before. But me saying no because of a certain amount of money that they want to give me, and somebody else saying yes, I struggle with that as well. I don't know if that's relatable.
Yeah, but you just have to accept that people are willing to go below their price where you would not. And that's something you just have to stand on. There's not really a right way to go about it. And also in the creative business, people try to lowball you all the time.
Part of the job.
Yeah, it's part of the job. And then on that moment, you have to decide whether it's more important for you to have your stage to send a message, or you say, okay, this is not worth my time, and I'll rather spend it somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually put Rachad on the spot and asked him if he wanted to read out one of the poems that he wanted to share with you guys today. So he's going to share one.
Yes. Wait, should I do?
Yeah, maybe because I got this out of the ending of your book.
Yeah.
Maybe you can explain this a bit and then.
Yeah. So well, actually, the page itself explains it, so I can just read that out loud, and then you understand what I meant by it. These are my truths. I do not know everything, obviously, and the things I do know are rarely of absolute certainty. My grandmother once said something that stuck with me forever. Meaning, the sky is clear and God is great. And that is all I know for sure.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And maybe one of my favorites in this book, so weird to say about your own book, but, which is, it's on page 42. Al-Hakam, the judge. Only through the years have I learned that silence is rarely an ally. Silence paves the way for a terrible echo, a sound that is perhaps not meant for the majority's ears or comes from a majority's lips. It sets vocal cords on fire and paralyzes the tongue. Silence is mankind's greatest murder.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I actually think this is a beautiful way to end the night as well. So I want to thank Rachad for being here today, being a big brother of the community as well.
Appreciate it.
A big applause for Rachad.